Friends, fans, and family members are still mourning the unexpected loss of actor and comedian Bob Saget after he was found dead inside of an Orlando hotel room last night. WFTV is getting reaction from a couple of local podcast hosts who sat down with Saget just days before his death.
Also, as the Omicron surge continues across the U.S., the new vaccine or test rule has gone into effect for large employers. We're also seeing how the COVID-19 variant is putting a major strain on hospitals once again across the country.
Right now, we are closer to crisis situation than we ever have been.
And when your insurance will soon cover a certain number of at-home COVID tests.
This is WFTV Tonight.
People around the world are continuing to mourn the death of Bob Saget after his body was found over the weekend. Staff at the Orlando Ritz-Carlton Hotel made the discovery in his room yesterday following performances at the Hard Rock Friday night and in Jacksonville Saturday night. Good evening, I'm Greg Warman.
And I'm Martha Sagowski. You can see that people today were laying flowers in front of that iconic house in San Francisco that served as a setting for the hit TV show Full House. Saget recently told Orlando podcast hosts he was, quote, touring like a banshee and recently tested positive for COVID-19. Nick Pampantona spoke to those hosts in their first interview since his death. And Nick, they say that they are stunned.
That is right. This is a picture and a tweet that Saget posted in Orlando Friday night after kicking off his new tour. The hosts say everyone has been looking to them for the answer of the question of how he died, information they cannot offer.
We have an unresponsive guest in a room. My officer is telling me that there's no pulse.
From an Orlando hotel room to a beer and flower-filled memorial in California, Americans are saying goodbye to Bob Saget.
Definitely no buttered bread.
Known as America's Dad, the 65-year-old Full House actor was found at the Ritz-Carlton Sunday afternoon. Officers saying there were no signs of foul play or trauma. They say they checked his hotel room after his family couldn't get a hold of him. They found him in bed with the lights off and no pulse. But inside a studio closer to downtown...
It's so funny because I have the most immature act that there is.
Saget's brand went beyond the surface.
The one thing about Bob that was always so impressive is that he always remembered you.
Tom Van and Dan Dennis carry that sort of brand on their podcast, A Corporate Time with Tom and Dan. Their interview last week with the comedian promoting his upcoming performance was one of the last of his career.
I thought it was a hoax at first, and I know a lot of the internet did too, because there's so many of those hoaxes out there. And then it's like when it's confirmed, you're like, how does this happen?
The duo's interview with the comedian strikes a different chord now. Over the course of 30 minutes, he often took them down a lighthearted but dark path, talking about the fact that he'd never retire. He was working all the time, and he recently got over the coronavirus.
They decided at the last minute, what the hell, when are we going to see Bob? You know, he might die from COVID. Let's go see him.
That's why we like talking to him so much, because we have that sense of humor. We have dark sense of humor, and we joke around about things you shouldn't joke around about.
And he always came in hot.
And that's what's hard for us, too, because we don't know what parts of that interview he was serious about or he was joking about.
The internet is now analyzing his comments for every possible clue. At the time, the host noted on air Saget was dealing with some sort of illness, but told us he said nothing of substance off air. They realize that's not the answer people are looking for.
We can't definitively say much of anything because we just don't know. So that's the hardest part, because I think everybody does want an answer, and we just can't give it to him.
Just to be clear, Saget only said his COVID battle was recent. Tom and Dan don't believe that's what he was fighting last week. Neither of the hosts went to his show, but their listeners told him he, quote, nailed it. The sheriff's office is now waiting for an autopsy results, along with all of Saget's fans. Live in the studio, Nick Papantonis, WFTV Tonight.